Hello, you're listening to this super awesome podcast crew swag. It's Matthew, Jacob, and Jan coming at you here, and we're going to be talking about Riot Games and how their actions affect rights holders, stakeholders, players, fans, all of that, with regards to them being a games producer versus an event organizer. So yeah, just to kick it off, I think it's the collective opinion of all of us, but I can mainly speak for myself here by saying that Riot is stretching themselves too thin with how much they're currently working on. Right now, Riot Games is operating 14 different esports leagues around the world, and that's just for League of Legends. Um, they have to work on the development of League of Legends as well, so patches, champions, skins, all that stuff. And they're working on 9 other games. So that's 10 games, 14 different esports leagues. It's a lot of work, even for a company with 2,500 staff. They really seem to be stretching themselves thin, and that kind of has. I got some examples. I went to Worlds in 2019, so I'll bring up that example in a bit. But mainly the point that I wanted to get to, and I'll ask you guys about it in a bit as well, is uh, how I think that Riot should be using third-party event organizers to run their leagues and their events. To be honest, because what they're doing now, it works to some extent, but there are quite a few flaws that I've come across, and I'll get to them in a bit. So mainly, I'll use Valve as an example of someone who I think is doing pretty well. Valve uses ESL, Faceit, Blast, a couple other third-party organizers to run their competitions. And what this does is, and that's more or less for CS:GO, that example. But what it does then do is it allows Valve to really focus on their big events, their equivalent of Riot's Worlds. They can throw more prize money in. They can throw more like production in. They pay for tons and tons of events organizers. They get the real pros to do it for them, and this really shows because I mean I'll just talk about prize pools here. The international in 2019, Dota 2's international, 34 million US dollars versus Riot Games League of Legends World 2019, 2.2 million. So I mean, what do you guys think about that? Like, would you rather have a bigger prize pool like the internationals doing, uh, because that's coming from the way they formatted it, the way Valve has approached it, versus how Riot's doing it with only the winner getting those extra sales due to like skin sales and all that. So what do you think is better, like more money for everyone or like more money for the winners?
So for me, like you brought up the skins, which is the big thing for the winners. But like generally speaking, it doesn't seem like they still get anywhere near as much as Dota players are gonna get for being in TI.
Hmm.
And like I think it's fair to say that if Riot were to give it to an external company, they could then ultimately invest more in the prize pools because they wouldn't be spending their own money planning the event, and that means that
Hmm.
more teams are going to get more money as well. Whereas like now it's literally just the winners who get it, and we have like the example of QV not getting his winnings still to this date
Yeah. Yeah.
from 2017 World. So Riot's system isn't without its flaws as well, and that's why I think the crowdfunding is probably a lot safer.
Yeah. Probably. Yeah.
Yeah, in my opinion, would be it's a bit complicated with this, as they probably should split the money between more of the teams to help them. Because you see some of the smaller teams trying to get towards. You have these wildcard teams getting
Yeah.
towards. Maybe if you would push them a little bit more, and if you would squeeze more money into these kind of teams, it might have a much bigger difference for them than if you're gonna compare huge brands like G2. They they need the money to just pay for everything, but at the same time, if you're gonna put just a little bit of this money to these smaller teams, it can make a huge difference.
Yeah, I got some stats here as well. Like with the bigger prize pool from the international, the bottom teams, 17th and 18th place, they got about $86,000 each versus the bottom teams, the 21st, like 21 to 24. in the rankings from Worlds in 2019 for League of Legends. They got $11,000. So yeah, I mean that's a side effect, right, of a bigger prize pool is I mean
Yeah.
everyone's winning more.
I mean, that's like flying tickets for the team.
Exactly. Yeah.
To be fair.
Yeah.
They just got to think as well. It's split between 5 players. The teams will have contracts where they get some of the winnings as well. So like
exactly.
11,000 isn't really going to cover anything at all, really.
Mm.
So it's not even worth them going in that respect.
Yeah, that's true. And yeah, and what then? Like the point that I mentioned earlier as well. I was going to talk about Worlds in 2019. So I actually went down to Paris to watch the finals. Not a positive experience, and this is where I'm really going to pick at Riot Games here for how they're going to organize that event, because they have systems in place that were actually quite positive. In the past, they've sold tickets to people going to like Worlds, or like LCS finals was a good example as well, where they sold them through the client. When they sold it through the clients, you get limited number of skins, but more or less everyone that wants to go is getting a chance to even buy a ticket. What happened in 2019 is there was like a secret link on Ticketmaster that got leaked, and all the scalping bots got to it. And before the official ticket sales even went online, all the tickets were gone. So no one had a chance to get a legitimate ticket. I ended up having to pay more than 200 quid for my ticket, nosebleeds, at the very top of the stadium, and it was not too bad because I got to go to Worlds. But I mean, who's paying that much for that kind of seat? It was like, I think the official price was like 40 quid or something like that. So not pleasant. And even then, there were so many empty seats, which really showed that those tickets being bought up by the scalping bots didn't end up selling at all, and all you end up then is a stadium that could have been full. It's not full anymore, so you get less viewers in total. And I mean, that was a fiasco in my mind, and how they ran that.
Yeah, and I think if we're going on personal experience and we're talking about they could improve it, I went to the NFL games in Wembley in the UK. Like those tickets were, I think, £70. So a lot less than you ended up paying at the 200, and we had like really insane seats right behind the goalpost, like near floor level for that price, and literally the entire stadium's filled. You don't get the bots and all the scalpers trying to like get them to sell them off. So clearly there are systems that are a lot better, and it's an interesting comparison because the NFL runs their own events as well. So like it is possible for Riot to do it, just for some reason they don't seem to want to do it anymore, and that's maybe why a third party doing it would be a lot better, in my opinion.
I've spent lovely 3 hours in an online queue with all the French text and everything. I was just like, yeah, sure. So that's my experience. So it's like there was no chance for regular person, no chance.
Yeah, and like Valorant being another Riot game example, they wanted it to be run by third parties, then they wanted to take it back, and like that really shows that Riot, they want to hold on to their own product and not even let anyone use it, like not even let anyone run it. And I mean, that's kind of like with their franchising as well. They don't want anyone else to have their product anymore, and I understand it's their game, but I mean, I think that kind of speaks to like the problems with franchising. And I mean, there are benefits, but there are also some negatives to that as well. I mean, what do you guys think about the franchising then?
So my opinion, the main issue I have with it that I don't understand, is why they have franchising models in the West and not in the East. I don't understand like this idea that all their leagues are equal, but they're not, because they're ran differently. We already know that like the standard of actual play is way different in Korea to America. It's the ongoing joke, like NA League. But I personally just don't understand why Riot want to run different things different. They're stretching themselves thin already, and they're stretching themselves even further by creating different rule sets and having different systems. And I think this is reflected, like the poorer quality in the franchise systems reflected in the viewership. So I'm just going to go through some stats that I found. This year alone, in the start of the spring split, viewership was down over 30,000 in week 1. Now, there's an argument that the lock-in tournament that happened this year in this new system that they've started in the LCS was a problem for that. But still, if you're losing 30,000 viewers in a year, it's not looking great. And in 2018, which was the first year of franchising, they had average of 200,000, and now they're averaging between 70 and 100,000. So basically a 50% decrease overall. So clearly, franchising just isn't working. Like, people aren't getting invested in the league. There is other reasons. Like I said before, NA league isn't as dominant as the Eastern leagues, but it's still not a great representation when these teams are paying 35 million for a spot. So also we were going to talk about the import rule, because this is a really big issue at the minute in league, and I'm going to be interested to hear what you guys have to say about this. But to preface it, the rule at the minute is each team can only have 3 imports, but the owners of the teams want to change that to be 5 so that they can have better teams for international success. Riot recently changed the Oceania rule to allow Oceania players to not count as an import, but teams aren't really biting on that. So what do you guys think on the import rule? What are your opinions on it?
I mean, the import rule, it makes sense in terms of producing like regional talents. I think in these terms, it's very important to keep the rule, because you should work with what you've got in a country. It works for Europe pretty well. They are fine. It doesn't work for NA for whatever reason. It's probably the academy. It's probably the work with the young talents, which I'm gonna talk about a little bit later. But I mean, you should work with what you have. I mean, spending more money on talents from outside NA is just it's a straight way to hell. Because if you lose in viewerships and you spend more money on players, that's minus and minus.
Yeah,
Doesn't make
that's a
sense.
losing recipe. Yeah. I was gonna say as well
Mm.
that with the import rule, when you remove it, I mean, so I can understand to some extent that these clubs, these teams rather, are maybe being pressured by, they could be pressured by sponsors for international performance, because I mean some of these NA teams got some massive non-endemic sponsors and non-gaming. They don't understand the franchise. They just want results so that they can get their product out to as like a winning product. So maybe there's that pressure there, but I do agree with you guys at the end of the day that you remove the import rule, it's going to ultimately end up being the death of NA League of Legends. They're not going to be able to foster that talent anymore, and they just end up with international players playing for them, which is fine. Sure, the teams win, but then no North American players get a chance anymore, really.
Yeah, and then it's still a case of like NA LOL being bad because there just are no NA players.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
interesting as well that this has come up in a year where, generally speaking, the academy or like rookie scene in NA is really strong. You've got Tactical, who's been argued to be one of the best NA AD carries at the minute. Johnson is up there in those arguments. Speaker won 2020 Summer Split as a rookie. So there are these rookies coming through. I know Golden Guardians have just got 2 collegiate players on their team in Niles and Iconics. So there's the scenes there. It's just not being progressed enough. And it's interesting to see the 2 arguments that are developing. You've got the owners saying that they really want the imports because they want to win and make more money,
Yeah.
increase viewership, and get chance at better sponsors. But the players know that this is gonna ultimately mean they lose their spots because they can't compete with these Korean players.
Yeah.
And as kind of like a preface for what Jan's going to go on to, LS was the one who highlighted that if the academy system isn't protected, then that's just going to be filled with imports as well.
True.
And then you're just going to literally lose the whole North American scene. And I think Riot should be moving towards pushing for the rookies. Like, we know America is not as big on PC games as they are on console compared to like Europe and the East, so they should be pushing more youngsters to get into league and trying to enjoy the game rather than thinking about other stuff like world success and stuff. But
Yeah.
so that's my opinion. That's the way they can save the academy system as well. But like I say, Jan's going to talk a bit more about that now.
Yeah. So basically, the academy system, in my opinion, it doesn't work how it should, because we see the NA constantly lacks a number of like good players. There's no talent pool. I think even how the players in the academy system, they are just like very restricted by the behavior of streamers. They need to stream. They are not on a level where they would be just making so much money from actually playing. So they would be able to like survive. So there play style and habits are influenced by being a streamer at the same time and a player, which this is not going to like train more talents. This is not going to make more fakers, more reckless players.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't work like that. And I think the biggest issue is that the academy system, or like the whole academy league, is taken as a B team
Yeah.
league
Yeah.
for the main roster. Because if I have players to mention in the CLG, you have Pobelto, Wild Turtle, like huge players, big names, and they are now in academy team. Same for in the TSM, Cody-san. These are huge names, and they are just in an academy team where they should raise new talents. And at the same time, they have players that been already on awards. They played multiple seasons. It's in my opinion, it doesn't work correctly. So, in what I'm thinking is there's importance to change the system. What do you guys think? Like, do you think that just running the league like B league for NA is the correct way, or?
Yeah, I mean it's a tough one, right? Because like, how can you stop old players from playing in there? Like, is what kind? It would have to be up to the teams, right? But of course, the mindset that we're getting now from NA teams is that they only care about winning, so they'd rather, and they also only care about pedigree, so they would rather trust an old pro that's basically on their path to retirement versus a new talent who they don't know is going to be good or bad. I mean, how are you going to stop that, right? Like maybe like some rule that stops if you've played in the LCS, you can't play in the academy anymore, something like that. But I do agree with you. Like it does need to change because it's stagnating the new talent pool even more. Yeah.
I mean, they could potentially open up a couple more spots in the league, like have two more franchises. That way, you get more of the like top tier pros on teams, and then it like forces teams to look further down the system for academies. I
Yeah.
also think that they could, because they've like obviously buying into the LCS, they had to make an academy team. They could also force the franchises to invest in collegiate and high school teams as well. So it's like even more of a system. Because if you look at like UK football teams like Man City and Man United, they have like the like academy systems that start like 14, 15, and they work right the way through to under 22s and then like into the top teams. I think that could maybe be a way of going about it. Like, I do think a rule, like you said, Matt, to stop old pros getting on the academy system would be a good way of going about it. But I also think they need to look deeper down the tiers. I think that could help it potentially.
Yeah, I got some insider information on that. I got a mate out in America who's actually the head coach for Cloud9's youth team. So this is like high school kids playing competitive League of Legends as well. So I guess that, and this is brand new, came out very recently. So I guess that what you just said is that's starting to grow now. I mean, Cloud9's quite a big team, so it makes sense that
Yeah.
they're kind of
Yeah.
ahead to it. But I mean, hopefully, that's the start of improvement in NA, and the import rule doesn't completely ruin everything.
Yeah,
Hopefully.
I'm glad that you mentioned this like college or like high school competition, which Riot is trying. Like
Yeah.
2019, they started this Riot Scholastic Association of America, which should help all these like high school and college esports teams to have a chance to have a chance to be a stars, to be new talents. Like it's a great chance for Riot to standardize the competition, to make difference. And I mean, if you would think about it as a scholarship like you have in an NBA, you have NFL, these kind of like, if you're gonna be good in playing, we're gonna help you with uni. So
Yeah.
we are studying masters of esports. Don't tell me that at the same time that you are training as a semi-professional,
Yeah,
doing
true.
some kind of course like this on the side,
Yeah.
where the uni is counting with it, that you are this kind of talent and everything. Don't tell me it's not a way. It would help as well with like the short lifespan of players, because you see players retiring at age 25, 26, and
Exactly. Yeah. What do they do afterwards,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
This could help form their career after this.
Very
just
true.
like ex-player. You are ready for doing something else.
Yeah. Right. I think unfortunately we're gonna run out of time there. Just to wrap things up, I'm sure we could go on and on and on about this, but yeah. So thank you for listening to this iteration of the super awesome podcast crew swag. This has been all of us. Pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.